our channel. I'm so glad you're here. I'm Professor Don Bush. I've been teaching accounting for about 30 years, been a CPA for about that long, and I've got a lot of great ways to explain accounting. So welcome aboard, and let's get rolling. Today's lesson is intermediate accounting. It's fixing accounting errors, which can be tricky. I've had a lot of practice doing it. I've made a lot of mistakes, and I've fixed mistakes by other people. And it's kind of fun. You have to be a detective. So today's lesson is about rent revenue. Rent revenue was improperly recorded. It was recorded in the wrong year. So we've got to fix the books. That's our job today. So I've got 7 steps, and 7 steps might seem like a lot, but they go really fast. If you fix mistakes a lot, they become automatic. But it's a good way to systematically think through the process. So here we go. Here's step number 1. First thing you want to do is find out, well, what did the company do or not do? When did they discover the error? So what's going on here is the error happened at the very end of 2001, and it was discovered at the end of 2002. And I like drawing these little simple timelines because it helps me visualize what's going on. So here's the error specifically. So on December 31st, 2001, the company received a prepayment of $50,000 in advance for renting part of its facilities to another company. The company debited rent revenue on the date of receipt, which was the end of 2001. And the rent was actually earned over 2002. So here's what's going on. They claimed rent revenue in 2001, but they should be claiming it in 2002. So there's the mistake. So what? So they made a mistake. So what's the result? That's the next step here. So rent revenue in 2001 is overstated, and rent revenue in 2002 is understated. And also as a result here, retained earnings at the end of 2001 or the beginning of 2002, either way, is overstated. Their profit was overstated, and that overstated profit was closed into retained earnings. So we have some things overstated. Rent revenue in 2002 is understated. So coming down the list, last thing is, well, when did you figure out this mistake? Because you want to fix mistakes as soon as possible. And they didn't discover the mistake until 2002, the end of 2002. So coming down to step number 2. So were there any incorrect entries done or not done? And when were they done? What were the incorrect entries? So you want to get a handle on this. And usually you can just look in the books and look at them and figure out what happened. So on December 31st, 2001, they debited cash, which they should have done. They received $50,000 in cash. But here's where they went wrong. They credited rent revenue for $50,000. Now in 2002, there were no entries made to correct this mistake or recognize the revenue in the proper period. So no entries done in 2002. So the next thing, step number 3, is that it's good to think about, well, if they would have done it correctly, what should they have done? And the reason why it's a good idea to do this step is it gives you something to aim for when you're fixing the books, when you're correcting the books. And so on December 31st, 2001, this is what they should have done. They should have debited cash, which they did do for $50,000. And instead of rent revenue, they should have credited prepaid rent revenue for $50,000. That is where they went wrong. So in 2002, they should have debited prepaid rent revenue for $50,000 and credited rent revenue when they decided to appropriately recognize the rent revenue. So that's what they should have done. So they weren't even close here. And this is a very common mistake too. It's easy to make these kinds of mistakes. So step number 4, you have to determine, well, are the books open or are they closed? Well, in 2001, the books are closed. What does that mean? It means you cannot make journal entries dated 2001. You cannot change journal entries dated 2001, and the income statement, which was overstated, the profit was overstated, was closed to retained earnings, and so therefore retained earnings is overstated too. So what does this all mean? It means that the books for 2001 are off limits. We can't debit or credit especially any of those revenue or expense accounts in 2001. They've been closed into retained earnings, so they're gone. But 2002, the books are open, which is a good thing because that gives us a lot of flexibility to fix things. So all the accounts in 2002 can be changed, and 2002 errors can be reversed out, and that makes correcting mistakes easy. Avoid creating new errors. It's real easy to think you're correcting the books and you end up making them worse. So you want to be on the lookout for that. But if you make them worse, it's no big deal because you can just reverse out what you did and start over and try again. So step number 5, if incorrect entry made in current year and books are open, we can reverse out the incorrect entry. Now, there were no entries made in 2002 in regard to this transaction, so there's nothing to reverse out. And that's too bad because it'd make life a little easier for us. But this is a pretty easy error to fix. So let's correct the books. Let's make a correcting entry. So here we go, step number 6. So in step number 6, we are going to credit rental revenue. We're going to recognize the revenue in 2002, which is appropriate and correct. And we're going to debit retained earnings. And a big reason why we're debiting retained earnings is because we have no other choice. We can't debit prepaid rental revenue. That wouldn't work. We can't debit cash again. So really our only choice is retained earnings. But there's also another reason why we're debiting retained earnings. And if you recall, the profit in 2001 was overstated. And so when we debit retained earnings, that brings down that retained earnings balance to the proper level. Now I've got a step number 7 here, which is optional, but we're not going to use step number 7 today because this entry in 6 is as simple as it gets. We can't simplify this any further. So there you go, folks. There is the process to fix errors. We'll do some more of these. I hope you liked this. Hope it helped. And if it did, hit that like button and the subscribe button. And I'll see you later. Over now.